Welcome to another Forte growth episode where we interview people doing awesome things online. We go over their successes, insights, and any failures to keep you motivated and inspired. Sit back. Let's go.
Welcome to the Forte Growth Podcast. Today we have Carl Roof, and Carl Roof's obviously been on many podcasts before. You've probably heard him talk a lot about EAT and the different things, but we do our best to avoid the same stories and the same EAT talk that Carl usually gives on podcasts, and we've done some different roads. So this should be a unique interview with Carl that doesn't involve going into adding addresses and things like that on your website. Instead, we dive into some of the recent Google updates. We talk about the helpful content update, page experiences, things like that. And we also touch the surface of EAT regarding, can you just use language to display experience? Is this the end of no-face persona sites? We talk about duplicate content and what Google is basically potentially trying to get rid of with these updates, which is essentially just spun or rewritten content. I think what was really interesting is his use of the KGR keyword technique. And for many of you, that might be a blast from the past or something you've heard be shit on before, but basically KGR, created by Doug Cunnington, who's also been on many different podcasts. He created this technique. Carl Roof still uses KGR very successfully, and he shows you how and why. We go into on-page things, what he calls Centerpiece annotation. I think I said that right. You'll hear it within the podcast anyway. A brand new SEO term that I've never heard in my life. And he goes into details about that with ranking pages as well. And a whole host of other topics we dive into. We also go into getting the most out of SEO conferences at the end there. So if you're looking to attend one or you are attending one soon, then that'll be some useful nuggets for yourself. But sit back and enjoy. All right. Welcome to the Forte Growth Podcast. Today we have esteemed Carl Roof. Welcome, Carl.
Oh, thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
No, thanks for coming on. Obviously we've chatted more, but it's good to catch up and talk about all the new things happening around the SEO space. But what are you currently up to now? What's your day-to-day looking like?
My main focus is on Page Optimizer Pro, my on-page software, the SaaS tool that I have. We've released a lot of new features. We've got like an AI writer now, and a big part of my day is going through like the support tickets, to see what's going on, like how people are using it. When you launch something, you don't know how people are going to break it. That's kind of the biggest thing. Something you don't realize actually is that people, if you create a tool, people will use your tool in a way that you never intended, but it works for them. Like it provides something for them that they need, and they have it worked into their SOP. But as a result, when they're doing it in a certain way, you don't know issues they're going to run into. Like, hey, I was doing it this way, and now you changed this. Can you change it back? Or I have an issue with this. And you're like, I never would have thought of using it that way. But there you have it. So there's a lot of that. And, we try to be as accommodating as possible with how people need to use the tool. So we're working through a lot of that. But overall, the last several releases that we've had have been really, really nice, and a lot of nice new features. And so pretty smooth, not too many like buggy issues, just more like feature requests.
Perfect. Well, what's the reason for adding an AI writer to Page Optimizer Pro when obviously you've got so many out there now? Is there a point of difference that you've taken regarding having an AI writer?
Well, we saw a lot of people who were actually taking like pop recommendations. So they'd run a pop report, and then they would take that, and they have systems and SOPs for putting them into other AI writers. And so our thought process was that we could probably put something together that in the way that we think and how we do our optimization in order to provide that for people. A big distinction though is that we don't really like to consider ourselves like an AI writing tool. We're an on-page optimization tool with an AI writing feature. But as such, like a big thing that we're doing is if you have your own GPT-4 key, you can put that in, and then it only costs like 1 credit to run the AI writer. So that way it's competitively priced with a lot of the other really low cost AI tools. So we kind of have it like set up like that. So you can kind of get the pop recommendations that you want, right? Like right there in the AI writer.
Nice. And I know you do a lot more outside of just Page Optimizer Pro. Just for anyone listening who may not be familiar with you and your background, do you want to maybe just do a brief deep dive into what else you've done and going on?
Sure. So I've got the agency, High Voltage SEO. We're a multinational SEO agency. We have offices in Phoenix, Berlin, Melbourne, and now in Jamaica and Kingston.
Oh, wow.
We're expanding. We're everywhere. Do not click on any of our ads because there's no escape. We will We will track you down until you give us money. And then I've got IMG courses, so Internet Marketing Gold. And we've kind of rebranded a little bit as IMG courses, but that's a place where my courses on SEO are. We, I think, have 40 plus other instructors now.
Wow.
Something like 50 courses on SEO. We also run tests on Google's algorithm and post those either every 3 or 4 months. And a little community for people to ask questions as well. So we kind of have that project going. And I'd like to say that I had some Machiavellian plan where I was going to have the agency, and then I've got the software, and then I've got the courses, so that kind of wherever anybody is with their SEO needs, and also price points that I'd have a product or a service for them. That wasn't the original plan, but that's kind of how it ended up happening, where out of the agency, we were doing the math that we run for Page Optimizer Pro in-house, start off with Google Sheets. And then we spun that off and created a script for it. And I showed that to some friends where they're like, would you like this? Does this look interesting to you? And they're like, it really does. And then on the courses side is I was teaching SEO to our employees and the people that we work with. And I was like, I've got these SOPs and all that. I could probably put a course together. And then that's kind of how the community comes out of that. And then running the tests as well. People always kind of like to see the tests. So that was an easy fit to put into the platform. So it was kind of interesting. It looks like it's really great integrated vertical marketing, but it just kind of happened that way. And now we're reaping the benefits of it.
That's awesome. Well, why would someone choose Page Optimizer Pro over some of the other popular tools available?
Well, there are two big distinguishing factors. One is we do our own math. And I think we're one of the only tools out there that actually does that. Most other tools are using somebody else's math. They're pulling in from other people's APIs. And a lot of tools are just giving averages, maybe slightly doctored averages. What we do is we actually have our own algorithm, and we're looking for edge analysis. We're looking for places where you can actually get an edge on your competitor with using terms in specific places. And then the other thing is price point. I think we are the cheapest enterprise level data tool out there, and we're not charging enterprise level data prices. And so if you're really bowling on a budget, then you're going up against huge. I think we do give you that opportunity where you can get a competitive edge on limited resources. And of course, if you have a larger budget, we have more features and more bells and whistles. But I remember when I was the little guy, and I would have enjoyed getting some help. And so we're always conscious of that we do have a price point that somebody that's just getting started, just getting out of the gate, there is a price point for them and they will get effective SEO out of the tool.
Nice. For people who are optimizing content, I know a lot of people, even on Twitter now, a lot of people talking about updating our content. There's kind of a lot of, I wouldn't say new strategy, but a lot of people talking about it more now rather than just publishing content. So how often, probably depends on the query, etc., but how often are you looking to potentially run something through Page Optimizer Pro or to optimize content and go back and update it?
There are kind of two strategies there. A beginning strategy, which I like and I advocate for, is to do a little optimization. And so we have a scoring system, right? So getting to a certain score, so get to somewhere between a 70 and 80%. Do that and launch the page and see how it performs. And then see if you get some movement up, or if you're tweaking it, like a page that exists, kind of get up into that maybe 70, 80 range. Wait for a couple cache dates. So that's Google coming through and running through the site a couple times. That's usually 10 to 21 days. And then do a little bit more, kind of tweak up and then see if you get some more movement and then tweak up. I call it climbing the ladder. I really like that kind of as an out of the gate approach. Now I know that's not always easy because a lot of people don't have the patience to do that. And also sometimes you just don't have the time or the resources to do that. You need to get all your optimization, and that's fine. But I would kind of approach it that way. Then I think at a minimum, you want to be checking things every quarter for your on-page optimization because the goalposts will shift. Google might have done an update, or you've got some competitors that just decided they didn't like it when you took their spot on page one, and now they're doing more SEO. So at least quarterly, that's actually a nice softball into a new feature in POP that we have called Watchdog, where you can actually click a button and we will watch the SERPs for you. And you'll get an email alert based on your schedule, like whether it's monthly or quarterly or whatever you set up for the check. And then we'll email you and say, hey, look, there's actually been change in your SERP. And here are the things you actually need to do to stay competitive. So we actually have, thank you for that wasn't planned for those watching. that was a perfect softball up into that feature. But we're really proud of that. And we actually have that for your question, because in the agency, we have that issue. How do we stay on top of what's going on? How can we protect the pages that we've done all this work on? It's to make sure that we don't get beaten out by some competitor or get, hurt by some update. And so that's why we actually created this Watchdog feature to make sure we can protect our most important pages.
I love it. Can you be proactive about this? For example, if you're already ranking number one for a term, maybe 3, 4, 5 months down the line, would you still go in and potentially look to optimize the page, even though you're still ranking number one?
So what I would do is I'd look to add a little bit to the page. I wouldn't want to tweak my numbers so much in terms of like changing something within a paragraph, but adding a little content at the end, people also ask questions that's easy to respond to. That doesn't take a lot to answer to.
Yeah.
I would consider that as part of a schedule, maybe quarterly, to add a little bit to the page, even if you're ranking pretty well already and you don't really see any threat.
Yeah, it's something that's very rarely or never talked about is going back to your pages that are already still ranking just to keep them there. Because obviously, I mean, I've had pages that have ranked one and then suddenly after updates and shifts around in the SERPs, other people are up there and moving around. And potentially if you're going in there more often, updating it, maybe you can prevent some of that stuff.
And at a minimum, you raise the bar to entry, right? So as you make larger pages, when somebody comes in and they run a tool like Pop or another on-page tool and they're like, oh, I need this many words to compete, they probably won't do well just writing that many words out of the gate because you slowly built that page over time, and it's going to make it really hard for somebody to shift you off of those top positions if you've kind of been slowly but surely building the page.
Okay. That's interesting. And you obviously mentioned that people also ask questions and things like that. I know Google recently, so-called retired the FAQ schema on their SERPs and left it just for big health sites and big authority sites. Has that changed anything regarding your on-page? Are you still using FAQ schema? Are you still having, even without the schema, still having a frequently asked questions section?
Yeah, I've actually seen some stuff where it seems to still have a benefit. So you're not really getting that real estate anymore within the SERPs, but I think it still can be beneficial for a page to put that type of stuff on there. One other option, which I'm an advocate of, is comments. Putting comments on the page, like opening them up to comments or adding comments to the page. I would make sure they're moderated. But that's an easy way because, when you think about Google has a preference for your sites being an authority. And an authority is a place that answers all the questions. It's a place that people are going to get their information. And one surefire way to show that people like your content is them asking you questions. It demonstrates that you're an expert or you know what you're talking about or they're interested in engaging with you. And to that end, when they ask those questions about whatever you've just written your article about, those are usually going to be very targeted questions, kind of like creating a people almost ask out of your own user base. And then you can answer with kind of term-rich answers that then tell these people what they need to know. And so I would look at that as a strategy as well. If let's say you don't really want to have the FAQ section or you don't want to add in that way, you can slowly add over time using your comment section. It's a really good way to do it.
Nice. That's a good idea. I still can't bring myself to turn comments on. I don't want to have to bother with it. Able to moderate it. Idiots commenting on stuff.
That's what the VAs are for. The VAs will moderate.
Okay,
You don't have to do it.
Yep, there we go. That's the tip of the podcast there. But I want to dive into a little bit. I know you talk about EEAT a lot on various podcasts, so I'm not going to entirely avoid it, but we're going to kind of touch on the surface there, especially with some of the current updates. And I just want to start with the new helpful content update that's been rolling out recently. Your opinion or what you've seen? I'm sure you've seen Reddit and Quora ranking for a lot of different stuff now, and honestly, it looks like shit, to be honest. But are they trying to weight maybe more experience with these updates because it's user-generated content? Are there signals that you're looking for on and off page?
Well, what we just talked about, those are comment sites.
Yeah.
Those are people literally leaving comments. What do you know? I've been talking about this for years, so like that doesn't surprise me in the least because it's demonstrating that people are getting their information there. They're engaging with experts there, people that they trust, and they're liking that information. And that makes a lot of sense to me that those sites would perform well, especially kind of looking at these useful content updates where I think a big part of what Google's trying to do is get rid of duplicate content, which has always sort of been a problem that they've tried to tackle. Because if somebody's just regurgitating the same things over and over and over again, they're not adding anything new to the conversation, and there's really no point in having that in the index. But if you've got these sites where people are asking questions that are relevant to them right now, and then they're getting a very topical or very recent or useful answer, it only makes sense to me that those types of sites and sites that are doing that would perform well in these last several updates.
So when you talk about duplicate content there, you're talking about people who are just basically rewriting what's on the first page of the SERPs and then just not really adding any more value?
Yeah, spun content. And I think a lot of AI content right now is duplicate content. AI isn't AI. It's not creating anything. It understands, it can predict words that are going to come, but it's basically basing that off of words that it's already seen. So in a sense, it's really just a fancy article spinner. It's great. It's powerful. And it's a lot more powerful than article spinners from 2012. But essentially, that's all they are article spinners. And as a result, if you were to take that content on its own and just put it right on your site, you're not adding anything new to the conversation. So if you're using AI content, I think you really need to edit for tone, factualness, because they lie. But it doesn't know it's lying. It's just guessing at what the right words are, and it's going to come out with incorrect information. For your brand, you'll need to edit. But then the last thing, and probably most importantly, is you're going to want to edit for uniqueness. That the information that you're providing that you got from this is actually new information or something that is a different spin on the conversation. And that's where I think you as the human would come in on your editing to take care of that.
So it sounds like then you could take, for example, a lot of people will take the headings and stuff from what's already on page one and kind of follow a similar format. But it sounds like you're saying then maybe you should start adding things that maybe aren't long tail keywords being shown to you and things that you kind of think logically what else should be covered in that topic that might not be shown already on the pages that are ranking.
I mean, you're going to have a certain amount of information that's basically the same. If you think about it, a question being asked, how does this work? Well, there's probably only one way that it works. That you're putting that on. But on that page, you can add a few things that are unique to what everybody else has. And I think there is some value to having a little bit. I don't think all of it should be completely unique. Like you shouldn't try to figure out a new way to do that thing because that's not what we're talking about. But a little section that has something that nobody else has is not a bad thing to look at and consider putting on.
Yeah. So it'd be like, how does this thing work? And then maybe your extra section is like, how does this thing work in the rain? Or I don't know, what else? Something it doesn't have,
Yeah. 4 out of 5 seniors actually do it this way, or they appreciate that kind of like something a little extra to it that is slightly unique. And you don't see that on page one.
Nice. And regarding experience on these pages, displaying experience, can you use just language to display experience? For example, I did this personally for me in my experience, things like that. Is that enough to show experience or is there more to it?
That's a solid question. And I don't think anybody has a really good answer to that yet. I have seen a lot of people that talk about using those I terms or we or my experience, like kind of trying to indicate through language that you have firsthand experience with the product or the service or whatever you're talking about. That makes sense. Something else that would make sense would be a unique image. If you have a unique image that's something that you created would show that you have actual experience with what you're talking about. That would be something else to add in. So in IMG, we had a really good test where somebody was playing with this. And on one article, they just used those types of terms. I did this, we did this, I tried this, those kind of words like that. On the other one, they actually asked ChatGPT to come up with if I were to talk about this from a unique experience perspective, if I were to talk about this from how I did this or that with it, and they kind of had some criteria, that actually worked better, than just kind of crassly saying I or we a few times, but actually giving more detail that got into the personal experience. They played with that and I got pretty decent results from it. So I think I could see that being just a little bit more than just saying I terms, but maybe some other trigger terms that would really indicate you have experience with the product and you're doing something unique with it.
Almost like trying to tell a story of how you used it, what happened, kind of really go into detail like that versus I tried this and it felt like this. Okay.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
Interesting. There might be something for listeners to add to their own reviews and give a story about whatever it is the product they're doing there. But further on, I guess, on this EAT topic without going too deep into it, but do you see this as potentially the end of no-face sites? I mean, I think you've talked about this before anyway, but end of no-face sites and end of personas just because Google's now obviously wanting that experience and expertise. We can portray some of that through language for the experience site, but the rest of it becomes a bit more difficult when you don't have a face on your site.
I think the no-face site, though, it falls under who is responsible for the site and who's responsible for the content. I think that's a priority issue in EAT, and it falls under the category of trust. In the last quality rater guidelines, they mentioned of all the things, your expertise, your experience, your authoritativeness, and trust, the most important factor is trust. And if you haven't demonstrated those factors, it doesn't matter how much experience you have or how much expertise you have. And so trust comes down to, who is this person that is writing this thing and who is responsible for it? Because what happens if they follow your advice and something goes wrong and you're just a completely fake person and there's no way for them to find you? That's problematic. And so that's where I think the faceless websites will go away, not because of like the expertise or experience side of things, but because of the trust side of things.
Interesting. And then I guess with like the big authority sites, a lot of the content there is, I guess you could say, faceless. But is it because they already have the authority and maybe they're considered a larger brand that Google knows that it just doesn't matter at that level?
For sure. I mean, if you have a site that's been around since 1995 and it's got millions of pages, they win. Like that's. I saw some people really complaining about some site. What was it called? Like Outlook India or something like that.
Outlook India.
It doesn't surprise me at all that it does well. They have been around since 1995 or 1994. Like that's the beginning of the internet. When did you get your first email address? I got mine in 1997.
Dude, I can't remember.
So they were around before I had an email address. Yeah, they're the big winner. I mean, that's the bottom line. And so it does not surprise me at all that site does well. I think maybe they got a little ding recently and some people are happy about that for whatever reason. I don't know why people get happy or sad or happy when somebody else drops, but by and large, you go onto their site and they demonstrate that there's a real person behind this site. There's a real company behind this site. They've been established for forever. And sure, their content might not be the best in the world, but because they've been around that long, because they've demonstrated who they are, that they're a real thing, that real people are behind them, you're gonna win. You're gonna do very well.
Yeah, because Google came out talking about they want to devalue a lot. I mean, a lot of those parasites, because people are buying posts. For anyone who's not familiar listening, people are buying posts on these big authority sites and basically ranking instantly. Usually just getting AI to write something really bad and putting up there with the affiliate links. But do you think Google will continue trying to devalue, not just full sites, because you can't just devalue like a full news site because of all the other things it does, but maybe these sponsored sections or things like that to try clean up some of the SERPs? Or is it just something that just they won't be able to do because if they devalue that, they're going to potentially devalue links?
Solid question. It doesn't seem like parasites seem to come and go out of fashion every other year or so. So it's probably just going to be an ebb and flow where these things work for a little bit and then they go away for a little bit and then they come back for a little bit and they go away for a little bit. So my guess would be it'll follow that kind of a pattern more than anything.
Yeah, it'll just be different parasites each time that win.
Exactly. I mean, that's what happens. It's like a couple of the old ones come back and all of a sudden there are these new ones. It's like, oh, these are clearly different and better because they're new, but it's the exact same stuff as before.
Yeah, nice. I don't think we talked last time. I don't think it was out, but Google SGE, the old AI search they've got going on I don't know if they've fully rolled it out or if it rolls out later this year, but obviously I'm sure you're seeing it in the SERPs too. How do you think this is going to affect maybe clicks on the SERPs? Is there anything that you're doing because of SGE or is it business as usual for you?
Mostly business as usual, because I think the things you want to worry about are your semantic outline on your site. Are you properly using your H tags? Does it follow a good format? Do you have entities in there so that Google can understand what this content is about? And, are you using your contextual terms? Because at the end of the day, what I think happens and what will probably continue to happen is that there's still the regular algorithm that's ranking these sites, in a particular order. And then after that, SGE would come in and look and try to extract data and extract things that it's going to find that's useful for the searcher. And how will it find those things? It'll find those things through proper semantic order. You've used your H tags correctly. It'll do it through the entities that it can recognize. So it's like, okay, I think this information is useful. It'll pull that out. So I think if you were worried about those things before and working on them before, then I think it is business as usual. If you blew it off and thought it was nonsense, then I think you might want to scramble a little bit to catch up, would be my advice.
Yeah, it's interesting when you look at like the little 3-pack in the top corner, it's never the top 3 results in the SERPs. A lot of them pull from number 7, number 10. I think some even from page 2 and things like that. Is that just because they're pulling, or that term or that piece of information just seems to that page has that entity that they're looking for and that passage that they're looking for to add to it?
That's what I think. It's easy for them to identify something off of that page, and they think it's useful to the visitor, that it helps with the type of the search query type that they have or the type of information that they're looking for.
So for someone to potentially optimize for that, would that just be trying to have as much variation within entities, keywords and stuff on their page whilst tuning for that main keyword? Would that be something someone could potentially look to do?
I don't know that it's varying it, like going far afield, but I think a lot of content really doesn't follow good semantic order. Like when you write an article or a page for your site, it should follow a Roman numeral outline, where the Roman numeral 1 that's your H1, and your A, B, C, Ds, those are your H2s. And you really want to keep strict to that order. And then within that, you're going to want to make sure that you've got information that follows centerpiece annotation. Centerpiece annotation is the concept of, once Google understands what a page is about, do all the sections on the page follow that concept, follow that topic? And if they do, then they get full credit. And if they don't, then that content starts to be devalued. And so you want to make sure that you're staying kind of on target with your content. Within that, then you're going to have contextual terms and entities and stuff like that, again, to make it clear what you're talking about. If you're talking about a kitchen, you could be talking about the actual physical kitchen and the function of a kitchen within a building or a home. Or you could be talking about a kitchen remodel, or you could be talking about kitchen appliances, or you could be talking about how the kitchen is the heart of the home, and that's where families often get together and express love to each other while they're doing family rituals or, holiday type stuff. All of those things are about a kitchen, but then they're all going to have different semantic terms, entity terms, are also going to have different contextual terms. And it's important to make sure that you're touching on all those so that Google understands what exactly you're talking about here. And so the clearer you can make that, I think, the better. And that comes down to using entities and contextual terms.
All right. So what was that term you used about the bodies? That annotation one?
Centerpiece annotation.
Centerpiece annotation. Okay. So do you want to dive into a little bit of that? I haven't heard that term before. I'm sure a lot of people listening haven't heard either. You obviously mentioned that each section is on the same topic and you get basically 4 points for it. So what would be an example of that? What would be an example of doing it incorrectly?
Well, like the simplest example that I always give is that one page should be about one thing. So let's say you've got a site about Mexican food, which I personally love, and you had a page about tacos. A page about tacos, and you're writing about tacos, and all of a sudden you just switch over and you start talking about burritos. That wouldn't make any sense. Yeah. We were on the tacos page, and so all that information should be about tacos. So whatever section you have about burritos is going to be devalued, and it doesn't follow centerpiece annotation. So even though that's still under the category of Mexican food, it shouldn't all be on one page. The burrito stuff should be on the burrito page. And so once you get too far afield from that topic, even though you might be in the same category, food, Mexican food, delicious food, that should be on its own page. And so I know that not in every situation it's as clear as that, but that's the concept of one topic, one page. Make sure you're covering that topic, but you're staying on topic. As soon as you start to slide away from that, that's where you run into some problems, and that's where I think your content can be devalued. Now, one other thing on that is I think in some of the more recent updates this year, centerpiece annotation has probably gone from just a page-by-page thing to a site-wide thing. So now we've got a site, about Mexican food, Italian food, French food, and tire and lube. Like speedy oil change. That's a problem. Because there's no connection there between those things. We've got the site that's about food, and then we've got the site about oil changes. And that part is going to be devalued. And on top of that, not only might that part be devalued, but the whole rest of the site might start to be devalued as well.
Interesting. I've got an example for you then on a topic that. So for example, tacos is very narrow, right? So we're talking tacos. For example, a term like how to build muscle. That's a very broad term regarding the centerpiece annotation stuff, because you'll be talking about training. You'll probably be talking about nutrition. You're probably talking about supplements. You might be talking about recovery. You might talk about sleep. There's a lot you would cover in there. So would you have to still cover all of that to be considered the, 100% check mark for covering that topic?
Something that Google talks about, this has been an age-old question, should I go deep and narrow and deep? So kind of going on one thing in a lot, or should I go across all those things, but cover more things, but be thin about it, essentially? And Google has always said, and in my experience, this has also been the better approach, is go deep. So the idea is do a lot on one and then move on to the other. So if I had to choose in that situation where I'm starting this site about building muscle, you probably need all those categories, but would I do like one post in each and kind of, go that way in order to get all the information on there? Or would I have the categories, maybe start them and then really go heavy on one? That's how I would do it, is go deeper on the one category and try to get a lot of content out, say in month 1 on that one. And then month 2, go into the second category and get really deep on that.
What about if you're targeting that term on the one page? That is a high volume search term. How to build muscle is a search term itself. So on the page, would you still cover all those categories on the page? And obviously you can internally link out to different categories, but it would almost be like your center pillar piece, because to cover the whole topic of how to build muscle, you couldn't just cover 10 training tips, right? You still have to cover all the other things surrounding, like that nutrition supplements, all that stuff. That would also be categories on your site.
That's going to be a pretty hard term to win. Yeah,
for sure.
Well, I'm not sure I would worry about that one too much, but I would have that page on my site, and I would have the sections. I'd probably use it as like a resources type page that kind of lays out how this site works.
Yeah.
Essentially, like, of those
almost
things.
Like a start here page.
Yeah. That's maybe how I would approach it. And then link out to the different categories. We've got the different exercises, the different meal plans, the different protein shakes, different supplements, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Nice. No, that makes sense. And on that, obviously you talked about the different silos and categories and filling those out and going deep. The content avalanche approach, going from the very low competition keywords and working out to the more competitive ones, is that something you would still recommend doing? Obviously, you mentioned about being really on topic on a site. So the whole topical authority thing is a big thing currently that people talk about. So is that something that still works, going low competition to high competition, or are you looking to just cover a category entirely? You don't care what order it's done in?
So Avalanche totally works still, and it's still a big bread and butter of mine, and it's probably made me a few $1 million at this point, and I teach it constantly, and very few people want to do it. So it's great for me. But it's not necessarily always going after low competition, or going after low competition and then going after high competition terms. I think the right approach on that is to find terms within your natural tier. And that's going to be kind of a volume-based determination, like how much traffic you're getting would equate to a type of term you can go for. But then within that level, in each level, when you post, you want to try to find low competition terms for the search volume. Now, as you get higher in search volume, they will naturally become more competitive, and that's okay, because you can then change the values that you're looking at in terms of what is low competition or what we think we can win through Avalanche type content. But overall, I think it's still, it's excellent. It works really, really well. It works like gangbusters. And it's not a complete SEO strategy. So it's not anything that you want to do and just be this and then like, all right, SEO's done. So it's more of a foundational thing. You'd be doing it while you're doing those other things that work. So while you're building out those categories that you need to build out, while you're doing your outreach for whatever offsite signals, you still want to do all of that. This is a foundational thing that you do to kind of slowly but surely raise the authority of the site.
So how are you determining the level of your site and what to go after then?
So the rough and dirty method is you look at Search Console over a 3-month span. And then you take your high clicks for that time period and your low clicks for that time period. I would toss out any outliers and then take that average. And you take that number, and then the starting point for all of this is go to Builder Society, SEO with no resources is the search. And there's a chart on there from Chris Carter from Serpwu. And he put this together as like a kind of a baseline starting point, and you can find your tier from there. Now I would say, and I think Chris would say that it's not complete. It's not, this is not the final product of it. This is a starting point for you to figure out, and then you're going to want to tweak that chart and tweak things a little bit, and obviously add in some more things as well to the system. But that's where you would start with to determine what your tier is.
Gotcha. And then, so within that chart, then it'll show you how to essentially rank the keywords to go after within your tier.
So the idea is that, so once you find your tier, let's say you're at 50 to 100 is your tier. So that means you can find, you're looking for terms that have a monthly volume of 50 to 100. From there, you want to then filter for lower competition. And you want to go in and find those terms that have lower competition within that tier. And then that's what you want to post. And the concept is that you will win these terms with little to no SEO. And what I mean by that is you're going to take that keyword, you're going to put it in the title tag, in the H1, in paragraph tags, and in the URL. And within a month to 2 months, you should be on page 1 through 3 without any SEO. And then the concept is that as you post all these things, these now get impressions and they gain keywords and they gain clicks. And as they do that, then you move up from, say, that 50 to 100 to 100 to 200. You move up a tier because those pages are gaining clicks and impressions and keywords, and they're building up the strength of your site. And the real thought process behind this is that when Google does an update and people say, I got hit by that update, I really don't think of it as being hit anymore so much as Google took away a boost. You were doing something that was pushing you outside of your tier to win some terms. And then this update happens and Google just took away that boost and it just put you back down where you belong. And so in order for you to kind of update proof your site or kind of reduce the variance of any kind of update or change in Google, you'll want to do things that are gaining clicks and impressions without SEO. And that's what this can do for you.
Nice. So what are you using then to determine competition of a keyword? Are you just doing KD from say address, or you got something a little different?
So I like KGR, keyword golden ratio, as a first filter. And then from there, then I would use one other tool, and I don't think it really matters, for medium to low competition. So it's kind of like, it's almost like filtering. Filter 1 is filtering by search volume, monthly search volume. Filter 2 is a KGR filter. Filter 3 is one more tool that is doing some sort of keyword difficulty analysis. And in doing that, kind of those 3 filters, what I've found is that we have a hit rate of somewhere like 7 or 8 out of 10 that we launch will hit like we are expecting them to hit. So they'll be on, say, page 1 or page 2 in a month or two with just that, with no SEO. And then they start to gain their own authority as they gain keywords and clicks and impressions. And I can tell you, I just put this in place on a site that wanted to do some consulting on how to set this up. And the site was kind of in a slow death over the span of like, say, 4 or 5 months. You can kind of see it start to go down. It leveled out in month number 1. And then in month number 2, you can see some slight gains. And in month number 3, it took off. And that's pretty common when we kind of put these things into place. It takes maybe the 3-4 months and you really see a lot of results after that.
Interesting. And man, I haven't heard KGR for a long time. A lot of people shat on KGR over the past few years, and obviously you're still using it. Don't maybe just dive into just for listeners who aren't sure.
I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why. It's because they didn't put the tier factor together with it. So, Avalanche on its own without KGR is not going to work. And KGR on its own without the Avalanche framework is not going to work. But when you combine them together, then you have a very, very successful strategy. KGR is a measurement. It's from Doug Cunnington. And again, you can just search Doug Cunnington KGR. And I encourage you to do so. He's written some great articles on it. But it's looking for terms that don't have, the results don't have the keyword in the title, is essentially what you're looking for. You're looking for fewer results in the SERPs where they've used the keyword exactly as it should be within the title. And the fewer you get, the concept is the less likely that they're actually competitive. They're not specifically going after that term, and then you have a better chance at winning it.
How do you, on those title tag, how do you balance then? Because obviously you're wanting the keyword within that title to show on the SERPs to be targeting or optimizing for that keyword, but often you also want to have something that's going to entice someone to click. Because if everyone has the same title tags that got the same keyword, it's like, well, how do you differentiate the page? So is there an easy way to balance that for someone listening?
Yeah, no problem. So you would take the term that you want to win, building muscle at 50, whatever. And then you want to use a colon or a dash or a pipe, and then do your clickbaity thing for CTR.
Yeah.
So get the keyword in, and then do a colon, dash, or pipe, and then say whatever you want to say after that.
Perfect. Easy and actionable for anyone listening to this. But I wanted to finish this interview as well. I actually went to my first SEO conference the other week, whatever it was, Digital Unfiltered in Vegas. It was awesome. Met some awesome people. Probably some people listening to this currently as well. But for people who are getting out there, I know there's some other big conferences coming up. I think Chiang Mai's in November. Some top tips for getting the most out of SEO conferences.
In my humble opinion, as somebody that speaks at conferences, I don't think anybody remembers a word that I say. And I give a lot of tips on stage, but they remember how they felt, right? So they remember the experience. And so what I try to do as a speaker is I try to make sure that somebody has an experience, that basically my talk, the last thing I want somebody to think like, man, that talk should have been a blog post. They could have read on my own time. So for the talks, I wouldn't worry about getting too much out of a talk. I would worry more about the experience. Was it fun? Did you like it? Was that interesting? And there were probably a nug or two here. But ultimately, it's the networking, it's the people you meet is what a conference is all about. Don't say no to anything. When somebody's like, hey, we're going to this networking event, are you going? The answer is yes. Hey, we're going to this bar. Do you want to grab? The answer is, even if you don't drink, go and hang out, do the dinners. And I know that a lot of people in our industry are introverts. I'm an introvert. It is difficult for me to do these things, but it pays off so well when you do it. And so I highly, highly, highly recommend going for the networking, meet as many people as you can, make as many connections as you can, and then foster those connections and those relationships. Reach back out to them. Hey, it was great meeting you. We were talking about this. I really enjoyed it. If you ever need anything, I'm doing this, this, and this, or I know these people, or if I can connect you with somebody, and then be helpful. Don't pitch anything, or don't, I could do that website for you, no problem. Don't do that, but be a resource and be helpful so that when people remember, like, oh yeah, I met James, he was really cool. Oh, he's got this podcast and he invited me on. That's the low overview. That's awesome. And those kind of things that's the kind of stuff you want to do and make those connections, because it just comes back tenfold. And when you want to do something, or we need to do something, or when, somebody's got a client referral and they can't take it, or they don't want it, or whatever, the people they think about first are the ones that are around them, the ones that are on their minds. And how did you do that? Well, you made the connection at the conference, you fostered the relationship, you're helpful in the community or the groups that you make from those things, and then you're going to get a lot back out of it. So that was a very long-winded answer to say, just go and do this stuff. Go and do the stuff and be active, and then follow up. Like, I guess that's the secret sauce.
Yeah, the networking is huge. I met some awesome people at the conference, and lots of people that I've interviewed on podcasts before and stuff like that. So meeting people in person is another level to just over the phone, camera, and video, and things like that. So if anyone's on the fence about hitting one of the conferences coming up, or any in the future, just go. It's great, and you'll get way more nuggets than, as Carl mentioned, than the speaking. Is actually talking to the speakers or people during the networking events. That's when you get all the good stuff versus just listening to the talk.
And if you're looking for a very first conference, I just did my own, that was my conference, SEO Estonia, in August, and we're doing it next year again in June. So Tallinn, Estonia is an amazing city. Get to a new part of the world, and it's really top level SEO. We really took care of. It was a fun conference. Like we had a lot of fun stuff going on. So if you're thinking like, what should I do as my first one? I don't know where to go. Come to Estonia. We'll take care of you. Tallinn's an amazing city.
Perfect. Well, Carl, where can people find you and see what you're up to and continue following all your progress?
The easiest thing is kyleroof.com. My team posts my stuff on there, and hopefully they're keeping it up to date. But you can find my stuff there.
Perfect. No, thanks for coming on, Carl. Appreciate it.
No, thanks for having me. That was a lot of fun.